You're listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what's happening with you all out there? Hope everything is going great, and thank you as always for choosing to listen to this episode of my Straight to Video podcast. Now, first up, on behalf of myself, Chris at our 80s Video Shop, and everyone else who was involved, a big thank you to all of you who came along and supported the release of the new anthology movie Serial, which Chris wrote and directed and got its premiere on Saturday night in Derby. It was a really fun evening and the feedback was great. Always a lot of fun to be in a busy cinema with people laughing and cheering right from the start. So again, thank you so much. If you missed out and want to see the film, then copies are available on DVD and Blu-ray direct from the shop and also at 80svideoshop.co.uk. So on this episode of the podcast, I got to nail down a guest I've been trying to have on the show for a number of years, but as you'll hear, he's been incredibly busy, so it was worth the wait to welcome glitch artist, designer of live stage visuals for the likes of Nine Inch Nails and Pearl Jam, and also, perhaps most importantly, VHS enthusiast Mr. Rob Sheridan. Over the past year, Rob has been working closely with music legends Pearl Jam on their massive worldwide Dark Matter tour. This is the first time Pearl Jam have used stage visuals on a tour, and it was Rob who they trusted to do this for them. If you've been to a show or seen any footage, you'll agree the results are stunning. Outside of doing this, Rob is an incredible artist and particularly a glitch artist with both photographs and images, but also onto analog media, which is where VHS comes into play, as Rob records imagery onto deliberately damaged VHS tapes using old VCRs, which are then connected to vintage CRT televisions. It's pretty stunning stuff which you have to see, and I fell in love with them when I saw it. We chat about all of this, along with growing up during the 80s and 90s, which saw him head out on this amazing creative journey. If you want to keep up to date with Rob's incredible schedule and body of work, then you can find him at rob-sheridan.com, which has links to his web store and also his glitch goods store, which I could clear out on my own. But right now, please enjoy my straight to video chat with Rob Sheridan.
Hello.
How's it going, Rob?
Good. How you doing?
Yeah, good, man. Great to see you. You're a lot more colourful than I am.
It's the whole laboratory, live in the art space that I have here. Always surrounded by weird video stuff.
Do you get to see much daylight?
No, so it's overrated. I do. I have a toddler now, so I'm forced to go out into the world and see the lights and stuff like that. But I stay up late and hide in my little cave. But this is a cool podcast theme, because it's very obviously in line with my interests.
Perfect, mate. Well, I appreciate you doing it and for Stephanie helping to hook us both up. I think I reached out to her. Cracky. I look back on my emails. I think it was originally 2003 and we couldn't get a date in the diary then. Then a few months ago, I thought, I'll loop back in and see if we can do something. And she said you had some time in your schedule.
Yeah. It's been a busy couple of years. Just very unpredictable, put it that way.
I've been trying to remember who it was who introduced me to your work and specifically your artwork. I know it was someone, we've got our own video shop museum here in the UK, and it was a customer there, but I've been racking my brains to think who it was. But I was very grateful that they said, you need to check this guy out because you'll love all his artwork. And I was blown away, particularly how your glitch art style crosses into the VHS world. For anyone who's not seen it, how would you describe glitch art?
Well, it's really become a much bigger thing that I think it used to be very fringe, this idea of taking media formats of any kind of technology, whether that's digital or videotape or whatever, and exploiting all their flaws, using them in the wrong way, breaking them down and to get interesting results and to really kind of explore the aesthetics that are created by the accidents of the media that we consume. That was a really kind of a fringe thing 20 years ago or whatever when I started doing it. But now it's something that whether you realize it or not, you see quite a bit. If there's a horror movie trailer, you're always going to see a little bit of RGB color shifts or a little bit of VHS shaky texture. Or if it's if it's a sci-fi or a thriller, you'll see the digital breakups in the titles. There's a lot of that gets put into the textures of media now much more commonly. And that all comes out of weirdos like me who like to break things to make art.
Because it's almost like you say, it's doing things the wrong way to discover the flaws in stuff. Do you think that's something that's actually taught these days in colleges and schools, whereas before they'd perhaps encourage you the opposite way? Say, that's not the way to do it. Do you think it's flipped now and that's perhaps taught
That's a good question. I find that these things, no one was really celebrating this 20 years ago when I was doing it, but I find that these 20-year turnovers of like nostalgia and time and reflection are really valuable and interesting. And it's like, I'm in my 40s, so it's kind of my first time really experiencing this, where the things that you are a part of 20 years ago that seemed new and untested and whatever then are looked back on very differently and celebrated. And then you start to realize, oh, that's gone on to inspire people who are now in charge of things, right? So my guess would be, and just knowing from like professors at art schools and whatever who've reached out to me, is I think people who were young at the time that this kind of started 20 years ago are now in positions of power, authority, whatever, in school and teaching, whatever, probably are bringing this into their curriculum more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's also cool because you get to like, I get to look back at work that I did 20 years ago, and now you hear from people who you didn't hear from then, who say like, this was my high school album, this meant so much to me at the time. You didn't get that at the time because they were going through it, and now you get to see the impact, that these things had. So that's really cool. It's a cool time right now for looking back on that kind of stuff.
Most recently, you've been doing some really cool work with Tony over at VHS's Life. Tony makes the fantastic video mold cleaners, which I finally got one earlier this year. Got it from America all the way to the UK.
I actually need to get one of those. For so long, my relationship with VHS has been like wanting the VCRs to be damaged and the tapes to be old and like, pulling that out of it. And now as I start to get a fondness for like actually preserving some tapes and holding on to them, I realized actually when I was doing the project that I got involved with him on, I needed to make actual clean, good copies of my tapes, and all of my VCRs. I've got like, I got like 20 VCRs, should be fine, but they're all like uniquely damaged. They all like record in bad ways. So I had to get 3 new pristine VCRs and not throw them down the stairs or anything like that to, just actually work properly.
Where was you finding those? Would you find them in thrift stores or eBay, or because they're getting harder to find? There's no one out there who can repair them. I think that's one of the main problems.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I realize that my conditions have been different than other people's, where I'm like, as long as it still will technically play, if it plays poorly, that's interesting to me, right? And now it's like, okay, well, now I'm trying to find pristine ones. Thankfully, Steph has become extremely good at scouring Facebook Marketplace, which is a thing I would never think to look at. I don't even use Facebook, but that's apparently the one thing that it's really good for. In fact, the stuff you'd see on eBay, it's all marked up by collectors and people, there are people who have things that don't want to deal with eBay, don't want to deal with shipping and all that stuff. And so there's this whole kind of secret world of local things. So this is something that Steph just sprung on me last night.
What'd you find?
This is a 1985 or 6 or something. This is a video telephone system.
What?
It's got a camera here, and you're supposed to put these in your house, and then you can see the people that you're talking to on the telephone. It connects to your landline phone, and they thought this was going to be the big thing, the Visitel. Apparently, there's a way you can get into it and actually do zooms through this thing. So someone's figured out how to. Anyway, so yeah, that's where we got our latest VHS. But most of the older stuff that I have that I use for art and stuff, all the TVs and everything, we found a couple local thrift stores that were like church-run donation places where they just get a lot of stuff, and then they don't even try to sell the CRTs or the VHSs anymore. They just put them in a big pile to send to recycling. We found out that there's like this tent out then behind this like one store where they just have stacks of CRT TVs. They get a lot of them from schools and stuff like that. So, Steph started like cozying up to the yard manager and be like, hey, would you mind if we just look through your pile of garbage TVs, And the guys out there are like, oh, whatever, we're throwing that away. And so, I'd go out there and be like, this is a 1969 Trinitron. Like, this is incredible. How much for this? And they're like, I don't know, $5, whatever. So I've got all these like really cool TVs that were just lucky finds, and I paid like $5-10 for this. So that's been one of our but it's becoming a problem now. There's like 30 TVs in the garage.
Yeah.
We're trying to move and pare down. And it's like, okay, now you realize how heavy these things are.
So how did you get in touch with Tony then? Was he someone who was on your radar doing the mold cleaners, or did you realize he was supplying the translucent tapes, or did he reach out to you?
So our neighbors next door have become good friends. Their wife there watches our kid during the day, and he plays with their kids. We were having a big Halloween party. We both have 12-foot skeletons out in the front yard. We combine the yards and do a big Halloween thing. And his thing is he's really into glow in the dark, everything glow in the dark. He had set up a glow in the dark spooky room for the kids. And I'm over there and he's like, hey, have you seen, you'd probably like this, have you seen, they've got these glow in the dark VHS tapes I saw on Instagram. I'm like, no, I didn't know about this. And it was that somehow because of that guy's, interesting glow in the dark, he'd been served up one of Tony's videos and then he sent me the link and I'm like, I've never seen this before. And I hadn't seen it before because it hadn't been done before. He was kind of first one to mass produce like glow in the dark VHS tapes. It was kind of like the thing that I was looking for to like make this project I wanted to do make sense. He's been phenomenal. And now I've got all these glow in the dark tapes. So it's fantastic.
Because it's called the School Zero VHS sets, right?
Yeah. I've been wanting to make, a VHS in some regards for a while. And I've also just been trying to just do experiments to kind of get at the core of like how to make video art something that you can sell or present to people in their homes the same way you can a poster or a print. That stuff's very understandable, right? And that's most of what I do, and most of my glitch art has been still images, but I make a lot of video stuff and you want to think about it like, well, how do I make that special? Prints have been cool for me because as a digital or media artist, like there's no original, there's no watercolor that I can make special to offer to you. So I make prints that I just make in limited editions, right? To just make it feel like, oh, you've got this one, it's numbered, it's signed, it's special, right? So how do I do that for video? I've tried a bunch of different experiments and this was the latest one, this idea that like making a video sculpture, this is like a glitching skull that just rotates for a while. And so to give it a physical piece that you can have, obviously you could sell digital downloads, but that just doesn't feel special. There's no limitation to it. It doesn't feel like a thing that you want to collect and have and cherish, it just sits on your computer. So the VHS tape idea was one way to like give you something that you can put on your shelf and to really give it this kind of tactile, connection to the media that it was created on and everything. So a while back, Tony Glow in the Dark tapes were the last piece of this because a while back, I had found this lot of used rental store clamshells that they used in the rental stores. And I'd got like a whole box of them that were from an actual rental store that had closed down. And so I had these and I wanted to do something with them because it's one of those things that isn't going to exist anymore. And so I repurposed all these clamshells and then printed my own artwork, put the inserts in. And then I got Tony's glow in the dark VHS tape was the thing to like make the tape itself feel special and then put little inserts in it and everything. So I wanted it to feel like something where even if you're like most normal people don't have a VCR around that's working, you could have something that feels cool that reminds you of going to the video store and whatever. And then it makes your digital file that you can play wherever feel a little more special because you got a piece of physical art. So it's a niche, I only made 50 of them. It's a small handmade experiment, but it's just a step towards like really thinking about video as a physical medium, which is really what our love of video stores is all about, right? It's about having a tactile connection to the media.
Have you got like a cool custom USB VHS style drive? Is that what goes with those?
Yeah, I did. That was the other thing. It's like, I got way out of hand for this project. It's a very niche thing for like 50 people.
If I'm going in big.
I'm going in. It's an experiment, right? So normally including a digital file of the art is not something that I do. I don't give you the print file for my prints because it's kind of like as a digital artist, it's like my original. It's all I have, right? So it's a strange thing to be like, okay, well, here's the digital file of this video sculpture, but it's kind of the only way to make it make sense for most people, right?
Yeah, for those who haven't got a VHS, trust me, it's on the VHS, but just in case, there you go.
Yeah, and then it opens up a lot of cool things. People can play it on all different things, on projectors and whatever, but I still didn't feel comfortable just emailing a download link. Didn't feel right to me. Felt like the digital file has to be part of the physical package. So Steph helped me find these little custom VHS tape USB. It's even got the back. It's got, the tape reels and everything. So the file comes on one of these and you can reuse it for whatever. I was down at the industry convention thing and I brought some of these with my reel on it as like a business card and handed out to some like friends down there and they're like, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, that's my extravagant experiment thus far, but I learned a lot from it. I realized people do crave a way to feel a physical connection to video and media. I see that more and more, and I don't think it's just about our nostalgia. I try to examine that. I try to think like, is the affection that people like you and I feel for videotape, video stores, all that, is it just nostalgia? Is it just the same way our parents would talk about the soda shop and whatever? Are we just old? And then I see through my own kid and through the interest that younger people have in this stuff that there was something very human taken away, which is this connection to our other senses, the sounds, the touch, texture, just tapping on this phone all the time doesn't fulfill a lot, and you don't build the same connections to media. I'm not saying everyone should everyone should go back to videotapes, like that's practical, but I do think it's a valuable way to examine our relationship with media and art and each other and the way we interact with everything now. I can't help but examine it more as I watch how fascinated we are as human beings through my son's eyes with tactile experiences. That's what we're drawn to.
You saying that, it's like you could have put this project with the rotating skull, you could have put it up on YouTube. It would have looked great, but people won't remember the time they clicked on YouTube to watch that video. They'll remember the time they get your VHS tape through the mail, opening it up, holding it, putting it in. They'll remember all that. It's something that'll stick with them. Yeah,
and just for my own purpose, I wanted to go on that journey as well. I wanted to I have all these couple of them here. These aesthetics very well. The bootleg VHS tapes of the 90s.
Yeah.
This was our YouTube, basically, is going to a convention or something like that, or the head shop down the street or whatever, and seeing the homemade bootleg VHSs where someone had compiled all the music videos of one of the bands you liked, or a bootleg concert that was recorded onto tape, and somebody photocopied a cover for 100 of them or whatever. And that was stuff that you couldn't get any other way. You could see music videos on MTV or whatever sometimes, but you wouldn't see a full concert or a music video collection or rarities or whatever.
Imagine how that was for us. I was into the hair metal scene from the late 80s. So very few of those bands came to the UK. So for us to get a bootleg concert on VHS was huge. It's so exciting.
Oh, yeah. That was our way of discovering things, and you felt it more. You became more a part of you because of the friction involved in having to track that down and feeling like you truly discovered something new when you found a tape that your friends had seen, and that kind of thing. So part of making that on my end has been really cool for me. And like you said, it's just it's about just creating a different experience with the art than just a YouTube video. And I truly wonder, if you're a kid growing up right now on TikTok, are you going to have any fond, special memories of that one TikTok video that you swiped past? The 700 of them you swiped past today alone, Is that creating any connection to art in your soul? I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. Do you still actively collect tapes, or have you started recently, or is there anything you're after in particular?
It's more that I was gathering any random tapes for a while because I would repurpose them and use them for art and stuff. And then I noticed just kind of would start putting aside ones that, oh man, I love this movie, and keeping that aside. Now it's turned into really, this sense of regret that I got rid of so many tapes when DVDs came around,
It's always the ones you get rid of that you're damn it.
Of course. At the time, it's well, DVDs are here. These look way better. Why would I still want all these tapes? And now it's everything looks perfect on your giant HD TV, and you have digital whatever. So now it's more about having this artifact of how video used to be. So I try not to get into collecting too much because it's a deep wormhole that I will go down.
It's a slippery slope.
The same way I do with most of my hardware purchases. I try to keep it to I'm always searching at garage sales and at random places, and I look for cool stuff and hope to find little treasures and stuff. I try not to seek out things online and get into paying a lot for them, but I am rebuilding what I once had.
It could be doubly tough for you because you're into it from the art side of it as well. So there's all the cool bootleggers out there now that are reissuing tapes and making modern versions of them and all that kind of stuff. So once you get down that as well, it could get very expensive.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I have that collector's bug. You know what I mean? I grew up as a collector of many things. There was a point in my life, my wife and I just sold all of our stuff, put our stuff in storage, and just got an RV and just traveled for a couple of years, just resetting in a lot of ways. It was very clarifying for me to really feel how much I didn't need. And that minimalism was really good for me, and it stuck with me because I do have a tendency to want to collect tons of stuff. But the practical reality is eventually it's we have to have jobs and make money and be in a place. And as soon as I get back into really being an artist and being in one place, well, you can see the stuff comes back.
It starts again. Just need to dedicate a room to it.
Yeah, I think I found a good middle place where I'm not an obsessive collector like I used to be, but I held on to the thing about it that is the core of what I like, which is, like you, I like to be surrounded by the textures of the things that make me feel like who I am, really. All this is about who we are and what made us us the people we are, right?
I've got a few years on you. I think I'm about 5 years older than you, but you were certainly a real product of the VHS generation, becoming a teenager in the very early 90s, long before DVD took hold. So what do you particularly look back on fondly from that time? Did you have a local video store you'd regularly visit, or did your town have like an endless amount of them, like many towns did, regardless of the size? They'd stick one anywhere. They certainly would in the UK.
Yeah, we had the video chain stores by the time I was really at the age where it'd be like, renting a movie every weekend, you go to the video store. So we had our Blockbuster kind of near my house. But prior to that, my dad lived in the city. My mom lived in the kind of the suburbs, and my dad lived in Seattle, the city. He was very much like a downtown person. He managed like a little mini marketplace that had a video corner in it. Basically, they had like a video rental desk in like part of this like mini mart, so it was very urban corner store, does a little bit of everything. It's a deli, it's groceries, and it's got a little video corner. So anytime I go and stay at my dad's every other weekend, he would just bring some tapes back from the rental place. They didn't even have the cool covers or whatever. They were just like very blank with like the title stamped on the side. It wasn't even like indie video store. It was like indie, just some guy running out of the corner of a deli. And he would just pick some tapes, based on whatever sounded interesting. And those would be there at my dad's apartment. And so I'd just watch those. And I got to say, there was nothing better as a teenage boy in the 90s, but especially as a little boy in the 80s, than having a divorced dad, because he did not care what movies you watched, And so it was like going for a weekend at dad's. It was like at his apartment, and I didn't have all my toys and whatever. And he didn't really have the same parental responsibilities that my mom did, but he just grabbed some tapes that looked cool. And a lot of the things that intersected with the interests of little boys in the 80s happened to be extremely violent R-rated movies. And so I look now, I'm like, okay, well, I know for a fact I saw RoboCop in the theaters. And I must have been 5 years old. And I loved it. But look at it now. It's an extremely violent, graphic, film.
But they made toys and cartoons from that as well.
Yeah, they did. They marketed all that stuff. They marketed to kids on the side.
They knew what was going off. They knew kids were watching it.
That was wild. So I had the cliched Gen X experience of just like seeing and reading and experiencing a bunch of stuff at a very young age that would be considered not age appropriate now.
I mean, how old did you say your son was?
He's 2. Well, he's already on a good path though, because he grew up in our house. So he grew up around skeletons and weird art and stuff. And so his new favorite cartoon is the Crypt Keeper cartoon from the 80s. Talk about things that they made for kids alongside things. I don't remember this, but we found it's on a streaming service. There's a Tales from the Crypt cartoon for kids, and the Crypt Keeper is a little cartoon, and he tells like a spooky story each episode. And our 2-year-old like sits there like riveted. He loves it. He talks about the Crypt Keeper all the time. So he's well on his way. We'll have him watching RoboCop by 5 for sure. I look back and it's like, I was a smart kid. I was able to process all that stuff in a healthy way. I don't know if my dad was sophisticated enough to understand that, or if he just didn't care what I saw. But it worked out for me.
Was you a Fangoria kid as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, see, Fangoria was like, at the particular age that I was at, it was like as I was getting a little older in the 80s, I would get Fangoria. Another thing, like my dad would take me to Tower Records and be like, pick out a couple albums, and I would always want to get some magazines, so he started to clue in again, because he worked at this market, they had magazine rack, right? So he would clue into the types of like magazines that I'd like, and he'd get some for me from the store. And so he would get me Fangoria was one of them. And I would read in there about movies that I felt like I wasn't able to see. Like they were like even beyond what I thought my dad would show me, because like you said, like RoboCop and some of those were marketed a bit more towards kids. But then there was like this other world of like intense horror movies that I hadn't seen yet. And so I'd flip through Fangoria and see pictures of like Nightbreed and stuff like that. And it seemed so scary and mysterious, like Hellraiser. I hadn't seen Hellraiser. Like that just seemed like some satanic world of just really cool shit that seemed terrifying, but I was fascinated by it.
Almost taboo in a way. This is next level.
Yeah, it was a taboo. It was the horror movie version of the Playboy magazines that my dad kept under his mattress that I'd pull out when he was away. I knew where they were. Your kids know where they are. But it was a different version of that sort of thing you're not supposed to see when I was 8 years old here or whatever. I was like primed to like track these things down as soon as I was able to. But seeing it through that window, early on, like these little pictures, it was funny to look back at Nightbreed's a silly movie. But to me, just seeing pictures of it was like, this looks like the scariest, most evil thing I've ever seen,
You'd have been growing up around Seattle when that whole music scene exploded too, right? Where was you in finding your identity at that time? Was you still just too young to immerse yourself in it all, or was you like right in the middle of it?
I was right in the middle of it, but I was just slightly off from being able to be in the making of it. You know what I mean? Like when you hear about Nirvana and Pearl Jam and stuff playing little shows at the Crocodile Cafe, early stuff around Seattle, I was probably like 9-10 years old at that time. I couldn't go. I wasn't in that yet. By the time that all got huge was right at the time I was becoming 12, 13. I was really getting into music and stuff. And so I was really into it and it was surrounding, but it wasn't like I was just too young to be going out to the shows and seeing all that stuff happen as it was happening.
Did you know it was right in your vicinity though?
Yeah, because again, my dad being right in the city center, he would like tell me about all these bands that were happening around there and stuff like that. And by 91, 92, I was like really into it all as a young kid. And so it was exciting to grow up through the 90s into my adolescence in this like atmosphere of so much happening in music. And at the time, in the early 90s, it was like you felt like you were in the coolest city in the world. For a minute. Every city's got that moment when their music scene becomes the one everyone's looking at. And we had that moment right at a formative time for me. So the funny part of it is because I was at that slightly off point, by the time I was old enough to go to shows, early 90s, there were a few problems with Nirvana. They didn't exist by the time I was a mid-teenager. And then Pearl Jam was too big in Seattle. It was too hard to get tickets by the time I was a teenager going to shows in the 90s. So I never got to see them. So it was like kind of like my 30-year revenge to sync up with them last year and do their concerts.
How many years has it been now you've been actually working with them? Has it been like 2 years now you've been on board?
No, it was just last year. I just came on to do their Dark Matter tour that started at the beginning of last year. And that arc of that tour is about to come to a close next week. Actually, I'm going out to Pittsburgh for the last show. I'm going to go out there and see them, and cheers to everybody who worked on that. I don't know if they'll continue with the stuff that we did or not, but this is kind of the closing of what they're calling the Dark Matter tour. So that's been my project with them. I haven't really been on with them with other things.
Just with me saying a couple of years, I just presumed the preparation for it would take such a long amount of time. But was it pretty fast once that you got on board, like the time frame to put everything together?
Yeah, because the album was already recorded. The artwork for the album was done. And they came right at like Christmas time, 2023, saying, we've got this new album. We've got some cool artwork. We're putting a tour together. We want to do visuals for the first time, because we feel strongly about this album and this concept. We want to present it a new way. So in a sense, we had a lot of time because we spent a good 3 months working on creating the visuals and defining it. But it was very much like, this is already in motion. The tour starts in May. You want to do it. And so we got rolling right away. So in that sense, yeah, it was over a year ago that it started, but it was very like, okay, it's time to go kind of a thing. But I definitely don't think it's normal these days to spend 2-3 months of devoted time creating concert visuals. I think it's usually something that's done much closer to like production time for rock bands, especially. But they wanted to do something special. And then that's the only way I know how to do it is really like, going all the way in. And so it was great to work with a band that really valued the artistry and really wanted to make it an art project, not just seeing it as just like some random shit to throw on the screen behind them.
Yeah, let's just make it look cool and that'll be it.
Yeah, I think a lot of bands are content with like, there's some cool looking stuff on there. It's fine. Don't think about it that much. And I haven't worked with many bands doing that kind of stuff since Nails, primarily for that reason, because when I was working with Nails, it was very much a artistic collaboration. It was like really thinking of every part of the visuals and music is all working together and being important. And that's not as practical for most acts anymore. Some of them just don't care. So you really look for those opportunities where you can really sync up with artists on an artistic level and really collaborate and make something special.
How was it for you seeing that whole Pearl Jam thing come together? Because didn't you do like a gallery did you see the show in like an arena, but it was empty? I think I've heard you talk about that the first time you saw it all come together.
Yeah, we did an art gallery to show photos that I took of the rehearsals where we rehearsed in the Climate Pledge Arena here in Seattle. The band did one dress rehearsal at the end of our rehearsals. And it was like the first time the show was all coming together, and it was like the visuals shows that I did were up behind them, and they were playing a full show, and they were playing it to nobody in this empty arena. And so, it was a special moment for me because I got to see it all come together. But it was also just like, I'm sitting there like watching it, and I'm watching it from a creative director side of like seeing what's working and what isn't. But just as a fan and as an aesthetic viewer, I was looking at this, realizing, first of all, it was beautiful because everything was reflecting on this like open floor. And I was also just thinking like, well, this is the first and last time these guys are going to be playing the show in an empty room like this. Every other time we see this, it's going to be filled with people. So I took my camera out and started taking pictures, and it turned out to be a kind of special capture of this thing we all created. So we did some prints for charity and did an art show of that stuff. And that was cool too, because it further communicated the way I feel about this stuff, which is that we are making art and really thinking of the things that we put up to work with the music visually as art in its own right. And from the feedback I've gotten, I think people really, realize that and appreciate it. Pearl Jam as a band had never had visuals before. They never in 30 years found the right solution for it. So they just didn't do it. So I'm pretty honored to finally solve that for them.
Testament to them as like a legacy act wanting to do a whole new chapter. I mean, they could just play the hits, they could just ride out, but they've never been that band.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. You also want to feel like, as an artist, you want to feel like you're working with artists who are still engaged enough with what they're doing that they want to keep moving forward. I don't want to feel like I'm just like doing something for someone who's just doing the greatest hits, doesn't care anymore, tour. You, I'm sure, like me, don't want to give in to this idea that you're just old now, repeating the same things and just doing the same stuff. You want to feel connected to forward movement. And I appreciate these guys who have been around forever, and they do great on tour. They're huge on tour. They do a great show. They could go out and play the same set list of the same 30-year-old songs every night and still make a killing. And, and they don't want to do that. And I really respect artists who challenge themselves, even when they could just kick back. And you know what? As a middle-aged dad now, I don't fault anyone who has the means to just kick back and chill out and enjoy your retirement. Sit back at the Margaritaville Active Seniors retirement home and sip your drinks and relax. I respect it, but it's not, my brain doesn't work that way. I'm not good at relaxing, so I have to keep doing things. Looking
back at your career and the big career moments, things really started very early for you. There was the whole Dancing Baby phenomenon when you were 17, which hit headlines. Then a couple of years later, obviously the Nine Inch Nails opportunity came along. Since then, it seems to have been like one new chapter after the other, even like what you mentioned earlier, you and your wife kind of just took a left turn and went road tripping to like reset. With things starting so young for you, I was wondering if you ever had a specific career plan, or was it just once things started happening, it was like, well, this is cool. I'll do this for a while and see where this leads. Did you ever have any kind of map at all?
When I was in high school, I really wanted to do computer graphics, and I had it in my mind that I maybe wanted to work in special effects on movies, and I was really into special effects, computer animation, all that kind of stuff. So I worked really hard to get scholarships and to go to art school in New York. And they had a computer graphics program, and I did it. I went to college, and before the end of my first year of college, I got plucked out of nowhere by Nine Inch Nails. And all of a sudden it was, hey, Mom, I'm quitting school. I'm moving to New Orleans to join a rock band. And after that point, it was like anything I tried to plan, all of a sudden there'd be a left turn. So I just stopped trying to plan. And I think in some ways I'd probably be a bigger artist in some form or another if I'd stuck to something as a career, but I wouldn't be the artist I am, and I wouldn't be who I am, and I wouldn't have had the ride that I've had if I'd ever been stuck in one place. And part of the thing with Nine Inch Nails was like, I was with Nine Inch Nails for 15 years, but part of that was like being involved in all of Trent's projects. So that included like developing a streaming service that became Apple Music, and we did a TV show development for HBO, and I worked with David Fincher on like the marketing for his movie that Trent was scoring. We did a lot of stuff. It was a varied 15 years. And then since then, it's just been whatever comes along that seems interesting. That would be cool. Write a comic book. Sure. I'll do that for a year. Then do this, do that. This Pearl Jam thing. I was not a person who was doing tours anymore. I wasn't doing concerts, but when Eddie Vedder calls, you take the call, and then you do that for a year. And then, now I'm working on a video game graphics that I did for one of my favorite video game studios that just came up at the end of last year, so you never know what's going to happen next.
Do you put stuff out into the universe and hope it kind of happens? What's the term?
Manifest, maybe?
Manifesting, that's it, yeah.
I guess so. Yeah, and I think part of that's been, having been someone who's been terminally online on the internet since I was a teenager. That's how that whole dancing babies thing happened. And that's how the Nine Inch Nails thing happened. And I think just making art and putting it out into the world, and you find your people sometimes. Like Tony, the guy who makes custom VHS tapes, that's the type of thing you happen to connect with people who have the same interests and who appreciate the same things. And for me, it's just somehow it leads to all these strange life turns. I don't know.
Be open to stuff. You never know what's around the corner.
Yeah. I guess I'm good at shifting gears. It can be tricky because I'm not an artist who's like just does one thing. There's some very famous artists who are famous because they make that. They do that thing. And every one of their paintings or whatever, it looks like that. And that's what they do. And they're very good at it. And the closest, I guess, glitch art, I've kind of held on to that because that's kind of the closest thing I have to an aesthetic. But if you were to just look at like what I did for Pearl Jam last year, you'd see no trace of that. So I really appreciate I've got fans who are like really into what I do, who have been following my work since the beginning. And they are like the people who can like see me in everything that I do, understand my kind of vision enough to understand where I am in all these different projects. So I really appreciate those people who can see that, because I know there's a part of me in everything that I do, but as far as what the project is and the aesthetics, it can be wildly all over the place.
So to bring things to a close and bring things all the way back to VHS again, I want you to time travel back to a Friday night, either in the late 80s or early 90s. Your dad didn't bring any tapes back, so you had to go to the video store. What movie soundtrack would you have on the Walkman, and what 3 tapes are you going to rent for the weekend?
So I appreciate you sending this question ahead of time, because it's the type that I can really overthink.
You're going to give it different layers, aren't you?
Of course. I have to, only because, like I said, the age that you are, it really fits neatly into like the way that the decades changed and music changed. And I'm at this slight offset of age where I was kind of really into some of these things when I was too young for them. And then I was, so late 80s and early 90s are pretty different for me. By the 90s, it was like my adolescence. I was into music and everything. And in the 80s, I was still in that like discovering the taboo world of heavy metal and horror movies and stuff like that, So my 80s list is a little bit different than my 90s. But in terms of soundtracks, my adolescence was really defined by like a really great period of time for soundtracks as like an art form, like the 90s really had some soundtracks. If we're talking soundtracks separate from scores, like the idea of a soundtrack as like an album that accompanies a film, right? If we're talking scores, it would have been like John Carpenter. Like I would have been like listening to a lot of that at that time. But I was really into soundtracks in the early 90s, and like The Crow, Natural Born Killers. The Crow was kind of a gateway into like Nine Inch Nails and some of that kind of stuff.
Even the Crow 2 soundtrack, that was bigger than the film.
Yeah, it was. They should have put that much effort into the film. But also, I remember like there was some soundtracks for movies that I didn't even see that were the sound. Like, do you remember the Judgment Night soundtrack?
Amazing. I love that film as well.
I never saw the movie at the time, but the soundtrack was like legendary. It was so unique. There isn't that same need to do that anymore because, everything's through playlists and streaming. You don't really need this like giant excuse to put a playlist together of songs. But
well, now they just take an 80s song and slow it down to a keyboard thing.
Yeah.
That's all they do.
Yep. And then so movies that I would be renting. I was looking specifically at that turn, the turn of like 88 to like 91. And man, if you just do a quick search, it was just banger after banger, man. So much good shit going on. And I came down to like, I'm trying to think of my like a few formative movies. Because again, like 1990, I'm 10 years old. I've already been primed by all the like R-rated movies I've seen. And so I'm like ready to like go full into like horror and sci-fi and all this stuff. So I was very affected by Total Recall. It was a movie that was like big for me around that time. They Live was a big one for me. It was one I remember renting because I thought it was about zombies, and then it was about so much more than that. And like, I was a 10-year-old kid or whatever, and I was like, whoa, so that one blew my mind. I think that probably like affected me as like, in terms of like who I am, my opinions and everything, like a lot. Like I really like began my journey as like somebody who like questioned the way that things are communicated to you and control and stuff like that. That was very eye-opening.
I mean, this was in the 80s as well, and it's like now with social media controlling what we see and think and all this kind of stuff. It's like a great foresight.
Yeah, some of those things are just such good. They are such apt metaphors, and you realize it's like things may seem so different now, but I think the patterns of things that are concerning to artists are always the same, because I think it's the artists who, whether it's a song or a movie or a book, those are the people who are looking at the things around them that feel in contradiction to being a creative, free person who can express yourself and do what you want. So I think that's the reason that some of these stories can be applied from whether they were in the 60s or the 80s or now. What they're talking about might be different, but, it's the same ultimate contradiction of like, especially when it gets into like who's controlling you and consumption and all that kind of stuff. And then, number 3, I'm going to go, this one's a little bit different. This was like I was still a kid at the time, and it's because of my kid now, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie. That was a big one for me at the time because I was like into the comic books as a kid, and it felt like a movie that was like respecting me. It felt like it was more mature at the time than most properties would have gone. And like, it wasn't the cartoon. It was like from comic books, and it was a movie for kids, but it felt like it was pulling from this material that made me feel like I was reading something cool, because I was into the comics where most kids at the time were watching the cartoons. So my kid's a huge Ninja Turtle kid. And so like, I was just thinking about that movie the other day because I was like excited for when he gets old enough to like watch that,
It's still a great film.
I know.
And that must have been such a big deal for you back then. I've got friends who are a little bit younger than me, and I just missed out on that the opposite way. I was just a little bit too old for it. I remember it coming out. But yeah, I've got friends who like, it was such a big deal for them. Probably like it was for Batman 89 for me. That was such a big deal.
That was a big deal for me too. I was 9 at that time, and that movie blew my mind. It was like that one. There were a few movies like at that time where I was so affected that I was in line like the day before for the sequel. Like Batman Returns, I was like, I had to be there. Like I had to have my mom to drop me off at the parking lot of the cinema to like wait to be the first screening. Same thing for Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade. I had to be there. I wore out my Betamax tape of Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom because I was 5 years old. And I don't know, I guess it's that 80s kid thing again. I loved the fact that they were ripping out hearts.
What version was you watching back then? I don't know if this is a UK thing, because I didn't realize until maybe me and my friend found out like a couple of years ago that there's actually a scene where you actually see his hand go into his chest and pull out the heart, because it never made sense to me.
Oh, they must have cut that for the UK, because that part of that scene specifically is like ingrained in it's like a formative. I definitely wasn't ready for that when it happened, but I loved it because it's like it's an old special effect where suddenly it cuts to a fake chest, but the way that the hand just goes straight through the flesh as if there's no rib cage or whatever. I probably got into David Cronenberg because of scenes like that in movies where they just played it real loose with how much you can just manipulate flesh with your bare hands.
Awesome stuff. I love it. Rob, I'll let you go, but thank you for chatting with me.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. I love the vibe of this.
Speaking of They Live, I don't know if you saw it or not. There was a company from Sheffield, which is like half an hour away from me, called Vice Press, and they actually re-released They Live on VHS a couple of months ago, and they did 4 or 5 variants of it. So all the tapes were white, and each one had a different saying on it. So one said obey, one said consume.
Damn, I might get pulled in by that one.
I'll send a link in the email. You could check them out. I think they all sold out and they're going on eBay for probably $300 or something now.
Of course. See, this is how they lure me back in, man.
Massive thanks to Rob Sheridan for sharing some of his valuable time with me right here on the Straight to Video podcast. That one was a lot of fun, and I loved hearing Rob's insights and passion about physical media and hearing about his early introductions to horror. I can't recommend enough that you check out his artwork over at rob-sheridan.com and also his Glitch Goods store, and I can't wait to see what's next in his story. Now, we are just a week away from welcoming Hollywood actor and voice artist Charlie Schlatter to our 80s video shop on Saturday the 31st of May. Many of you will know Charlie from his role in The Delinquents with Kylie Minogue, or perhaps his role as Dr. Jesse Travis in Diagnosis Murder. You can come and meet Charlie at the shop from 11 a.m. on the 31st, and we'll be having a special Q&A followed by a screening with an introduction from Charlie in the evening. Daytime is free admission with a charge for autographs, and tickets for the evening event are available from www.80svideoshop.co.uk. It's gonna be a great day. So that's all for this episode of the show. Really appreciate you listening and for the ongoing support. So until we chat again, make sure to always be kind. Please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.